Hello, Shando. So what kind of problem are you facing?
Hello. Can we get, because we can't get in.
No, just
the password show that we are not invited.
No, you don't need any invitation. Just you have the link. Did you receive the link?
قول له استاذ عندها دو لينك ياك دو لينك وعندها الايد وعندها واحد الكود تدخلهم وحنا اون فال اكسبتي سور بلاس.
So just you see there is I will write maybe for you, Jacob, if you can transmit to her. So this is the code she should include in case of the requesting code. But if not, she just should get connected. Then we will accept her being with us.
Professor Najib, when you try to log in, it's telling you this meeting is for authorized attendees only. And then it says sign in to join. And when you press that, it's asking you to enter a password.
No, don't enter any password. Just for example, say I want to get connected through Gmail, then use your Gmail address.
Yes.
Shandeo, can you use the Gmail address for the Alliance?
I think it will give you two options. Do you want to connect through Facebook or through Gmail? Say Gmail. If you are already connected, it will be easier.
Hello.
You should add your email and your password for Gmail.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Prof. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm good, and you?
You.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So maybe can you send us your CV just to introduce you?
Okay, I'm Dr. Gams.
I have Frederic Biucci, so I admitted Frederic Biucci. I think you are the second speaker or the
third one. The third, I think so, the third one.
Okay, so maybe I will introduce you. Just send me your CV maybe by email or WhatsApp as you want.
Okay.
Now we're just trying to get some other people connected.
انا جو في لو ترافاي ديال كو انيماتور جادمي لي جون وانت ديريجي لا غيون.
ايوا صافي داكور.
انا غنبدا نقبلهم وانت ديريجي لا غيون بروفيسور.
واخا داكور.
Professor Najib, can you please check the settings? Maybe there's something that you could click to allow people to join easily.
Okay. I sent the code to Dr. Jacob, 871182648880, in case they are requesting the code of the meeting. Monsieur Hassan, وقال لك ما كاين شي حاجه في
لا كلشي مزيان. هما دابا كيدخلوا، هما شحال من واحد دخل دابا. دابا غير هما خصو يدير داك يورك على داك لو لين ياك، يورك على لو لين ولا طلب ليه الكود يعطيه الكود ويعطيه داك ليد ايد. راه كاين تما ايد. كاينين جوج حاجات.
لا I wrote the number, the code number for the Zoom meeting.
انا غادي نقلب كاع على لو لين ونقلب على كلشي ونصيب.
واخا شكرا. فالون ياكام انا قبلت فايل ياكام. Jacob, who is the first speaker?
Yes, I'm the first speaker.
Okay. Hi, you are welcome, Kurdamilisk and Lori Harrell.
Hello.
Hello, you are welcome. So,
thank you.
Jacob, if you could share the screen and put the announcement.
Pardon me?
Hello, you are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Nice to see you. I'm Dr. Najib Kisani from Marrakesh, Morocco. We are trying to get everybody on board this podcast.
Excellent.
Hello, Dr. Prince from Democratic Republic of Congo.
Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof.
Ça va?
Yes, I'm fine. Yes, I'm fine. Okay, I'm very glad to have in our Zoom Mrs. Lori. Lori, welcome, Miss Lori.
Oh, good to meet you here, Dr. Kazadi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are welcome.
Jacob?
انا غنصيفط لهم استاذ لينك ولايك ولو كود بجوجهم. ها هو فوالا هو كلشي دابا بهذا يكليكي عليه ويدخل ويدير راه كلشي تما سوق بلاص.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Mr. Hassan is my right hand in the managing of this Zoom system.
Yes. I am to assist you co-animator.
So welcome Samuel Shigam and Duroda Milis, and Muslim Beatrice is already with us.
Thank you.
So Dr. Franz, I think we can start, and we will activate the YouTube live streaming.
Je peux lancer. نقدر نلونسي دابا يوتيوب.
ولا بلاتي شويه
Sorry, Professor Najib. Shandeo is failing to attend. Do you have the link for the Facebook
yes,
live
on the chat? Just
on the chat for the Facebook?
The link, the ID.
For the Facebook, please.
For the first?
For the YouTube, sorry, for the YouTube.
Shall we start it now, or?
I think it's important that we start. I'll keep speaking with Shandel. It's important that we start.
Okay, now it's diffused on YouTube. سي حسن دونك نديمارو يوتيوب.
انا ديماريتو استاذ، انا كنتسنى باش يكونيكتا، انا ديماريتو.
واخا تخي.
انت تتكلف بالاجتماع ياك، ولا غنتكلف لك بهذا الجانب التقني ماشي مشكل.
D'accord. Dr. Jacob, shall we start?
Yes, Professor Najib, let's start.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you to the African Epilepsy Alliance for this second webinar concerning research. I think it's a very good occasion to see all our colleagues. I think we still waiting for some other colleagues to join, but we are already on live streaming via YouTube and Facebook. And thank you to all our participants, to Jacob, to Chantal, to Daniel Gams, Musimbi, Youssef, Pentaish, and also Durda Milisk, Dr. Franz Kazadi, Frederic Biucci, Lori Harrell, John Kagema, and Fallon Yakam, and Samuel Shigam, and also all the other participants who will join within a few minutes. And I ask Dr. Jacob to say a few words before starting first presentation. Dr. Jacob, could you unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, Professor Najib, for the introductions and for welcoming all of us. I'd also want to extend my warm welcomes to you all. I wish we will have a successful webinar. This is the third one. And looking at the presentations we have today, I'm sure we're going to have a great webinar. Thank you, everyone. I hope we all enjoy. Back to you, Professor Najib.
Thank you very much. I think you can introduce the first speaker. I will introduce the third one. Maybe Dr. Franz could be the second one.
صيفط لك استاذ اللينك ديال اليوتيوب الا بغاو باش يمشيو ليه نيشان صافي سي ديفيزي.
Okay, I think we are also on live streaming via YouTube, so you have also the link on the chat if you want to share it with all your colleagues who want to follow us on YouTube.
دابا تقدر تانيمي استاذ يلا تبارك الله عليك.
Dr. Jacob, could you present the first speaker?
Thank you very much. I would want to welcome Professor Lisk from Sierra Leone, who is our first speaker. Professor Lisk is going to talk about epilepsy research in Sierra Leone. Over to you, Professor Lisk.
Okay, my slides have been forwarded. Can I have my slides, Professor Najib? I send them to you.
Could you just share your screen from the green button? Partager écran or share screen?
It said it's host disabled participant screen.
So there is on your screen down, there is the green button, Partager écran in French or share screen.
Yes, it is saying that it is disabled. It said the host has disabled the participant screen sharing.
Try now, please.
Okay,
Try to share your screen.
Yeah, it's on there now.
Yes, now it's okay.
Yes. Okay, so
sharing. Yeah, perfect. Would everybody please unmute his microphone while Professor Lisk is presenting?
Okay, welcome colleagues and everybody. This is a short presentation of a preliminary study of the knowledge, attitude, and practices on epilepsy of our healthcare workers in Sierra Leone. The slide you can see is the center of Freetown, and there is the landmark, the most famous landmark called the Cotton Tree, which is over 500 years old. But still, I think the discrimination against people with epilepsy is even older than 500 years. Our epilepsy update courses, which we do around the country, we do sort of a composite class that comprises of doctors, community health officers. These are so-called clinical officers in some other countries, I think also clinical assistants in other countries. These are health workers that are trained to a level higher than a nurse, but less than a doctor. And we train the doctors, the CHOs, as well as nurses, all in one class. And it's because of this that we decided to look at the attitude, knowledge, and practices of these three groups that we train together to see if there are significant differences. So in fact, the aim of the study really was to assess the background knowledge of these healthcare workers on epilepsy to determine if there is significant difference in the basic knowledge among the various cadres, to determine any biases, conscious or unconscious, against people with epilepsy, and to use the information to improve training of healthcare workers. So for this study, we looked at hospitals and health centers in the western area of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has 5 geographical areas. The western area, which contains the capital, Freetown.
Mr. Lisk, could you please just increase the volume because we are difficulty to hear you?
Now, how do I do that? I can see.
Or if you can present it a bit louder, please.
Well, what I do, I'll speak louder then. Okay. We looked at hospitals in the western area of Sierra Leone. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. As I said, Sierra Leone has 5 geographical areas. The western area, where the capital Freetown is situated. We have the eastern province, the southern province, the northern province, and the northwestern province. We looked at all grades of nurses, the community health officers, as well as doctors. These doctors were mainly medical officers. These are doctors who were not in any postgraduate program. So we took 20 in each cadre, and generally these doctors and nurses and CHOs that we study are not routinely involved in the management of patients with epilepsy. So we wanted to see what their basic knowledge is. So we gave them a self-administered 24-item questionnaire that looked into demography, epilepsy care knowledge, source of knowledge, personal attitudes, including social tolerance, willingness to provide care, and their practices. There was a 100% response rate. 55% were males. Usually, mainly the doctors and the CHOs were more males, whilst the nurses were more females. The mean age was 35.5 years. The nurses were a little bit older, about 38 years. So we can see that these nurses and doctors have been trained for over 10 years. 31% have never treated someone with epilepsy. 6.7% have never known someone with epilepsy. 8.3%, mainly the nurses, believe that epilepsy is contagious, and 98% believe that epilepsy can be controlled. We looked at their sources of information on epilepsy, and as we can see from the slide, most of them got their information from formal lectures, usually while they were in school. But we also looked at continuing education and self-education, and we can see here that the doctors, 70% of them did have some degree of continuing self-education, mainly from print and electronic media and the internet. The CHOs have some amount of self-education and continuing education, but not so the nurses. And to look at their attitudes, we asked 3 questions: whether they've known someone with epilepsy, of which 93% of them said they had. And then we asked whether they will be willing for their children to interact with persons with epilepsy. And 95% of them said they will. And then we asked them if they will be willing to allow a relative to marry someone with epilepsy. And here, just over half of them said they will. I think when the study was done in Zambia, they did a lot better than we did. 75% of their population actually said that they would. But when you break this down into the 3 different categories, if you look at the doctors and the CHOs on the left side of your slide, you can see that they were very similar. 12 or 13 out of 20 in each group were willing to allow a relative to marry somebody with epilepsy. But when you look at the nurses, it was completely the opposite. Only 7 out of 20 would allow a family member to marry someone with epilepsy. And then we also wanted to look at their preference, their willingness to treat people with epilepsy. So we gave them a list of 10 common medical conditions that they are usually familiar with, and asked them to rank the top 3 of those 10. And then we computed all their answers into this particular table. And what we see here is that epilepsy was at the bottom of the list, next to mental illness. And only 1 out of the 60 participants ranked epilepsy as their first choice. And 2 of them ranked epilepsy as their third choice, and that was it. So epilepsy was not a popular condition that they would like to treat. And then we flipped the question round and asked them what are the 3 least conditions that they would like to treat. And here again, we can see that epilepsy and mental illness are amongst the top of the conditions that they are less likely to treat. Then we wanted to know something about their knowledge or perception of causes of epilepsy. And as you can see from the table, head trauma, back asphyxia were 2 of the commonest causes that most of them identified, but some of them also identified cerebral malaria, meningitis, febrile convulsion, and possible hereditary. But if you look at the last 2 sections there, demons and witchcraft, it was interesting that 3 nurses and 1 CHO actually believe that demons and witchcraft has something to do with the causes of epilepsy. And then we looked at their knowledge of the manifestations of epilepsy. Again, loss of consciousness, convulsion, tongue biting were all identified. Not so many of them actually identified incontinence, confusion, and staring. When it comes to staring, you can see that the doctors did better than the other 2. In fact, the doctors did better in identifying most of the manifestations of epilepsy compared to the other 2 categories of health workers. Now we looked at the emergency management of a seizure, of a convulsion. And we see that most of them would turn the patient on their side. Some of them would give oxygen if available. But the worrying part of this question was that almost 70% across all 3 categories said that they would place a hard padded object in the mouth of patients having a seizure. And then some of them, particularly the nurses, say they will hold the patient down. So that was something that needed to be addressed. And now we gave them 5 drugs and asked them if they could identify which ones are epileptic drugs. And I think they did reasonably well in terms of carbamazepine and phenobarbital and phenytoin. A few of them identified aminophylline and aspirin, but this was not common. Now, we wanted to know what their perception of what people with epilepsy can and cannot do. So we gave them a list of activities and asked them which activities they would ask people with epilepsy to avoid. And again, they did reasonably well on this one: drinking alcohol, swimming alone, driving a vehicle, cooking in open fire, working with dangerous machines, and climbing heights were all identified. And also, none of them actually said people with epilepsy should not go to school, which is good. And only occasional of the participants actually said that people with epilepsy should not have a job or get married. I think in the Zambian study, up to 20% of their sample said that people with epilepsy shouldn't have a job or shouldn't get married. So in conclusion, the basic knowledge on epilepsy is inadequate among healthcare workers that are not directly involved in treating patients with epilepsy. Doctors had more knowledge and better practices than the CHOs, and nurses had the least. There is still bias against people with epilepsy among our healthcare workers. 8.3% of the healthcare workers, mainly nurses, believe that epilepsy is contagious. In general, however, healthcare workers can give reliable safety advice to people with epilepsy, and they believe that people with epilepsy should work and should marry. Emergency care during a seizure is suboptimal. The findings from this study have now been incorporated into our training programs for healthcare workers. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisk, for this very interesting talk. Dr. Jacob, could we take some questions, or maybe we'll let the questions till the end?
Professor Najib, I was going to suggest if there are quick questions now, we could just take 2, then we have the rest at the end.
Yeah. So maybe I could start with one question for Professor Lisk. So I'm very happy to see you with us, and you're welcome. And I think we have a good collaboration to develop in our continent for our patients with epilepsy. So I want to know in Sierra Leone if you have any collaboration with the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Social Affairs in your country, between your association and the politicians to assist patients with epilepsy.
Yes, in fact, all these workers that we are training, they are all employees of the Ministry of Health, and we train them in health facilities, Ministry of Health facilities, and the Ministry of Health has a focal person for epilepsy in the ministry, and also the person in charge of primary health care is closely associated with the epilepsy program in the country.
Oh, very interesting. And I want also to know if you have good collaboration between all the university hospitals in your country and I think the specialists. Is there any collaboration? Are there any societies or associations of specialists in collaboration with societies of patients?
Not directly, of course. I am associated with the university myself. As you can see, our emphasis really in our country and several countries like ours is to train more health workers that are not medical, that are not academic. We have put a lot of emphasis on nurses and community health officers because these are the people who man health centers far away from the capital, you know, in the districts. And so they come across more patients with epilepsy than we would see in our teaching hospitals and our epilepsy clinics in our teaching hospitals. So our emphasis is on a lower cadre of healthcare workers and try to make them efficient in dealing with people with epilepsy and to know when to refer for specialist services where these are available.
Interesting. I don't know if there are any other questions. If not, I think we can switch to the second presentation. And I will be happy to introduce Professor Gams Massi. He is the second presenter. He will talk about clinical research on epilepsy in Africa, challenges and opportunities. So Dr. Gams Massi Daniel is consultant neurologist in Douala General Hospital. He is also assistant lecturer at the University of Buea. He is also general secretary of the African Academy of Neurology and vice president of the Epilepsy African Alliance for West Africa. He is also a very active person in research and collaboration. He is French speaking, but also English speaking, so he is ever active in African and also in this English speaking group. So Dr. Gams Massi, it's
thank you, Professor Najib. Thank you all for participating in this webinar of the Epilepsy Alliance Africa. So I'm very happy to present you for this second presentation on clinical research on epilepsy in Africa, challenges and opportunity. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you can just share your screen.
Yes, can
I hear you.
Yes,
okay. Okay, let me just share my screen.
I ask everyone to unmute his microphone, please.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So research on epilepsy in Africa is a big challenge for us, and especially in the field of epilepsy. What is research? Research is a scientific investigation for knowledge production. So there is the aim of the research is to contribute to literature, is to improve clinical practice, and research should be helpful for the community and also for advocacy. So when you go to PubMed and you click epilepsy in Africa, you will see that since 1959, Africa has produced 1,651 paper on PubMed on epilepsy. And when you go deep inside, you will see that per year the number is increasing. As you can see, in 1959, only one paper was published on PubMed, and now nowadays we have around more than 100 paper published per year in PubMed. So when you compare it with research on epilepsy in the world, you will see that you have 153,000 paper published on epilepsy. So that means what? With more than 10% of patients with epilepsy, Africa contribute to only 1% of papers of research in the field of epilepsy. So there is a great gap between the resources and the research paper. But you know that PubMed is not the only research tool for paper. In Africa, we have also journals that are not on PubMed, but are also source of information in the research concerning epilepsy. What are the challenges? The challenges, one of the main challenges is the scarcity of epilepsy specialists. There are a few neurologists in Africa. The number is increasing actually, but there is still a need of more neurologists, more epileptologists, and more specialists of trained nurse on the field of epilepsy. There is a poor availability or access to diagnostic facilities and treatment. In Africa, we have a treatment gap where more than 80% are not on treatment or are not controlled on treatment. So we have also a pure community knowledge about epilepsy-related issue and stigma. So that is one of the important points, especially for Epilepsy Africa Alliance. There is a need of more information about psychosocial and psychosocial consequences of epilepsy and stigma on patient epilepsy. We need more data, so we need to do more research on this field. There is also a societal and cultural barrier, and only some of the issue contributing to this deficiency. And also one of the important limitation is the financial limitation and lack of sponsorship. You may know that in Africa, there are very few countries where the government sponsor research, especially research in the field of epilepsy, and also where university sponsor research. So there is a great need of finance or funding to go deep into research. To illustrate the lack of epilepsy specialists, I've taken this paper of Volde Emmanuel and Girma published in 2014 that assessed the number of physicians or specialists in the field of epilepsy. And you may see that there is a huge scarcity of neurologists, neurosurgeons, there is a lack in diagnosis tool, AEG machine, especially CT scan and MRI machine. So there is a huge need of diagnosis tools in Africa. So what are the opportunities of research on epilepsy in Africa? One of the main opportunities is our patient. We have many patients. For example, in my consultation, there is no day in my consultation where I don't see a patient with epilepsy. So we have resources for research, especially patient. There are still different features of epilepsy that need to be explored. Like I told you, psychosocial consideration, stigma consideration need to be explored. We have also clinical features. As you may know, there are now two epilepsy-associated conditions discovered in Africa, onchocerciasis-associated epilepsy and Nodging syndrome. So I think if we go deep into research, we may find other type of epilepsy. There is also the field of treatment. We have local plant, we have concoction, we have African pharmacopée. That is one of the field which has not been well developed in research. So there is also the field of genetic, and there is almost nothing about genetic in especially sub-Saharan Africa, genetic of epilepsy. That's why in our different research paper, sometimes we don't even mention the genetic aspect of epilepsy, the genetic causes of epilepsy. But when you compare it to what is done in the rest of the world, especially in developed country, we can see that there are many genetic related epilepsy that have been discovered. So in Africa, we still need to go deep into research of genetic causes of epilepsy. I know that to go deep into genetic, we need more material, we need molecular biology. So that's why it is also important to advocate on epilepsy, to advocate on the need of equipment, on the need of diagnostics tools to help us to conduct good research and publish good paper in the field of epilepsy. So this is my last slide. It's just to encourage all of us. Epilepsy is one of the field of great interest, especially in Africa. We have the patient, and we have the patient, and also we have the how can I say it? We have the fighting spirit. So let's work together and try to publish and contribute to research as much as possible. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gams Massey from Cameroon, for a wonderful presentation. I'll now ask participants if they've got questions for Dr. Massey. We'll take 2 questions at this moment. You can also post your questions in the discussion forum. then also prepare questions to ask at the end of the, towards the end of the webinar. I've got a question for you, Dr. Marcy. Thank you so much for a brilliant presentation, tackling issues to do with epilepsy research in Africa. I'll be saying more about that as well, but I'm interested in your ideas about doing research that is helpful to the community. I think you said that in your first or second slide. I think that's very important for Africa. In your opinion, how best can we, or what can we do to ensure that the research that we do it benefits the communities that we work with, it benefits people with epilepsy, and it is used by governments. We don't just want to research and put the research in the libraries without that knowledge being translated into policy or action. What are your views on that, Dr. Marcy?
Thank you, Jacob, for this question. I agree with you. Research should be helpful for the community. For me, it's one of the main goals of research. And in my opinion, research should be, for example, research question should be focused on the problem, on our problem, local problem. For example, there is a huge need of to contribute to change in the psychosocial perception of epilepsy in most countries, in most African countries. There's a huge need to change the cultural perception of epilepsy in most African countries. And this, to address this, we need to have data. To have data, and also to present, to advocate for it, we need to have data. So that's why we have to focus our research on our local problem before going further. As you have seen in my presentation, genetic comes only in the last slide. So I think for now, regarding our environment, it will be difficult for us to go deep into genetic research, but we have our local problem, we have our local interest that may be helpful to address before going in another step.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have one question for Dr. Gams.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Dr. Gams, I think it's a very interesting talk, and I think myself, I'm very enthusiastic and I'm very happy to collaborate in this group. And I think we have a lot of productivity starting now. I think, as we discussed since the first webinar, to develop some subgroups of research. And I think Dr. Gams is one of the active members. So my question for Dr. Gams is, how do you see the collaboration, the multi-centric collaboration in order to produce research and to publish papers? Because I think we have one strong opportunity is to give, by example, in any topic, by example, anti-epileptic medications or maybe stigma or any other topic. I think if we reach to have one representative per country, I think we'll be very strong and we'll have good confidentiality, and we can produce many papers. What do you think about the collaborative works? Because it does not cost a lot of money like genetics or other equipments. And I think we just need to have one questionnaire to be circulated, to have one representative in each country, and we can sort out a lot of interesting papers for the African Middle East Epilepsy Journal, or maybe the index journal like Epilepsy and Behavior.
Yeah, Professor, that's one of interesting question, and I thank you for the question. I also thank you for your engagement in the research in epilepsy and also in neurology. I work with you, and you are an amazing researcher. You are a hard worker, so I thank you for that. I think this is one of the main point, the collaboration in the field of research in Africa. I think you have set up a good research network, that need to be reinforced. That need to be reinforced, especially when you are talking about representative in any African country. There is a need for a representative in any African country. There is a need for more collaboration. There is a need of also more complementary field, because I think in Africa is not only epilepsy is not only the problem of neurologist or neurosurgeon or health worker. Epilepsy is a social problem, is a cultural problem, is an economic problem. So we need to be able to involve all these fields. So social specialists, cultural specialists, etc., to have to be sure that we cover all the aspects, all the feature of epilepsy in Africa. So I agree with you. We need to reinforce our collaboration, and I'm available for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've taken 2 questions now. Please feel free to post questions in the discussion in the chat forum, and also prepare your questions to ask when all presenters have presented. Dr. Prince Kazadi is going to present in our next webinar in August. I did not get time to finalize his slides because of work commitments. So in place of Dr. Kazadi, I'll be presenting my slides on epilepsy research in Africa. These are not it's not a long presentation because I did not get a lot of time to prepare for that. So is it okay if I share my slides now, Professor Najib?
Yes, go ahead. And meanwhile you are sharing your slides, I suggest all colleagues to discuss in the end maybe the creation of the subgroups of research in different topics. And I think we can also sort out some papers, as I suggested, for example, maybe 3 or 4 papers for the African Middle East Epilepsy Journal per year, and maybe 1 or 2 for the epilepsy behavior.
Yes, that's a very good suggestion. We need to keep writing. So can you see my slides?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Jacob Rugarem Gombate, and I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm going to talk about epilepsy-driven, Africa-driven epilepsy research, and this topic fits very well into what has been presented by Professor Lisk from Sierra Leone, and also Dr. Masi from Cameroon. Indeed, research is very important for Africa, especially in the field of epilepsy that we are all involved in. But what is Africa-driven research? Sorry, I don't seem to be able to move my slides. Okay, resorted to using my mouse. So first, the outline of my presentation before I talk about what Africa-driven epilepsy research is. I'll just give you a summary of what I'm going to talk about. I'll define it. I'll also raise some questions about African research. I also provide you a summary of a short research that I did, provide a summary of the findings, recommendations, and suggestions. So I will try to use simplified languages, seeing that we've got a mixed audience, and I've got no interest to declare. So what is Africa-driven research? It's indeed a very broad topic in the social sciences, but also in the hard sciences. We know that a lot of research happens in Africa, but not all of the research is Africa-driven. So when it is Africa-driven, it has to be initiated by Africa. It should include African institutions, governments, universities, organizations, institutes, publishers, as well as regional institutions. the problem should be conceptualized and defined from an African perspective, and African researchers should play a part in that. For it to be African-driven research, the methods, the ethics, the theories should also resonate and be appropriate to the African situation. It is also important that results be made accessible to African communities, students, policymakers, workers, and professionals. And this is something that the previous presenter talked about. We need to have research that reaches or that is helpful to the communities that we work with. That's very important. So I said earlier that there's a lot of research happening in Africa in several fields. This is also the same in the area of epilepsy. There's a lot of research that is happening, but there are some questions in terms of that research. Who's doing this research? Who owns or funds the research? Who benefits from this research? How? In short, who drives this research? And they are driving it going where? And as Africans, where do we sit? Are we in the driving seat? Are we passengers? Are we in the back seat? Are we in the trailer, or are we on top of the car carrier? We need to be asking all these critical questions about research in Africa. So to understand some of these questions in this short research, I didn't try to understand all the questions, but some of the questions that I posed in the previous slide. I did an analysis of epilepsy research that focuses on Africa. I could not find an African database that indexes more research on epilepsy, so I used Google Scholar. As you can see on the slide, there is a picture from Google Scholar. But what did I focus on in Google Scholar? Seeing that Google Scholar is a very huge database. So I applied two search terms, epilepsy and Africa, in Google Scholar, and I looked for articles that were deposited in this repository between June 2019 and June 2020, which is just a year. I sorted the articles by date. You can do this automatically in Google Scholar. And I included articles that talked about epilepsy in Africa. That's according to the two search terms. And what did I find? There were a total of 98 articles. These articles were manually screened by author, by topic, and also by research population to ensure that they were Africa focused. 22 were excluded because they were repetitions and some of them were irrelevant. At the end, 76 articles or publications met the inclusion criteria, and these were reviewed. The review came up with some findings, and this is just an overview of the findings. Most of the research was published in Europe, in India, and the USA. And I'll give you the figures, most was published online, which is quite an opportunity. Universities or professional associations were involved in some of the publications, and the big international and commercial publishers were also involved, and many publications were from conferences. Now, in terms of the specific figures, I'll start by showing you the number of publications by country, how they were distributed, the 76 publications that were included in this review. In terms of Africa, most were from South Africa and Nigeria, with 17 and 18 each. There were some, two, Uganda, Kenya, Egypt, and Cameroon, and also one from the other 6 countries. This shows us that epilepsy research is limited. These are only a few African countries shown, and their research is concentrated in 2 countries. Reviewing or analyzing just 100 articles in Google Scholar might not be very strong, but in terms of scoping, it gives us an understanding of what exists in terms of epilepsy research. I'm sure even in PubMed, we should be able to get figures that show us where epilepsy research is concentrated in Africa. The other finding is to do with publications according to where the publication was, the publishing was done. So you see in this donut chart that only about 18% were published in Africa. That's an important area for us researchers to look into. For example, why we've got, as the light, why we've got only 18% out of all the 76 articles reviewed are published outside Africa. Some will see this as an opportunity, but it's an area that we need to look at critically. Then here, I've also did an analysis according to the number of publications published in African countries versus those published outside. And the results here are showing that, for example, South Africa, almost half of the publications in South Africa were published from outside. And when you look at Nigeria, almost all the publications, those ones that you see in blue, they were done outside of Nigeria and actually outside of Africa. And the situation is the same in all the other countries. Actually, some of the countries with 1 or 2 publications, they don't have publications that happened in their country. So that's also an important thing for us researchers to look at. But when you look at number of publications by authors, you find that about 66% were African authors. That's something that we should smile about because it's very positive. But when you think about where this research was published, then you also it also becomes important for you to think about this positive thing in light of the other things that we have seen that were not so favorable for Africa. So what are my recommendations based on this small study of African researches available in Google Scholar? I think there is need for governments and African institutions to fund research. That's very important. There's also need to initiate African conferences. You saw from my presentation that some of the articles that were in Google Scholar were articles that came out of presentations done at conferences. So there is need for us to work on increasing conferences in Africa and publishing from those conferences. Then there's also need to publish in institutional repositories of African universities. From the articles that I reviewed and those that came from South Africa, some articles were published in university repositories. For example, the Open UCT at the University of Cape Town. It had a good number of articles that they published. Then it's also important to use African journal hosts, databases, and indexing sites so that our research becomes accessible. The African Journals Online is an important aggregator of published work, as well as the African Social Work Network. There are many other ones. It is also important to build the interest of students in epilepsy research, those who are doing honors, masters, and PhDs. If they do research on epilepsy, it is likely that they will be involved in epilepsy at the level we are involved now. And it is also likely that they will be interested in working in the area of epilepsy. My own interest in epilepsy started with an honors project that looked at marital status of people with epilepsy in Zimbabwe. And I then continued working in the area of epilepsy. So it's important that we start to work with students early on. I'm glad that in Rwanda, for example, they are already working with universities, and that's an important starting point. Specific recommendations for the Epilepsy Alliance Africa: it's important to start an online repository. It doesn't cost you anything. We've got a website, we can put publications online. It's also important to work with universities, and I've already mentioned this. It is also important to form a research committee, task force, or network, and I'm glad Professor Najib, you just suggested this, and I think it's something that we should take on. Then it's also important that we publish in African publications, including AMIJ. AMIJ, that's the African and Middle East Epilepsy Journal. So it's important that we consider publications that are local. Then suggestions, further suggestions for African researchers. We need to participate in and support African research, and we need not to prioritize research from outside, especially led by institutions or people from outside. I'm not suggesting that we don't work with them, but I'm saying we do not have to prioritize it at the expense of African research, because African research has got advantages because we conceptualize the problems and we're also researching from an African perspective. Then I've also read about ethics dumping, which is a process whereby people coming from outside prefer to do research in Africa because they think ethics committees in Africa are not very rigorous, or you don't pay very much for the ethics committee, so it becomes cheaper to do research in Africa. So we also need to be mindful of that. While research done by people from outside can be beneficial, it can also come at a cost. So those are important issues that we need to be aware of. So in conclusion, I would like to say that Africa-driven research is research that is conceptualized and initiated by Africa and includes our African institutions and researchers. But for this to happen, research funding must be available. African publishing, indexing, and database options must also increase. As the Epilepsy Alliance Africa, we have a role to play in improving research production, dissemination, as well as knowledge translation. Ndatenda siyabonga zikomo, shukran, merci, that's thank you everyone. I would be happy to hear in the chat forum how you say thank you in your own language so that I include this next time. Thank you for listening. Over to you, Professor Najib.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob Mugumbate from Zimbabwe, and he's now in Australia. Thank you for this very nice presentation. I think you gave a very nice picture about the research in Africa and all the trends and difficulties faced in Africa. I think we can get 2 or 3 questions. Maybe I will start with the first one. So in your results, I think you focused maybe on, I don't know if you did it for the English-speaking countries, because I didn't see any productivity from North Africa. Because I can share with you one study that has been published recently. I think you can see it, and they did very nice presentation about oil productivity in all the continent. And I think, of course, they found that Egypt is the first one, followed by South Africa, then Morocco and Tunisia are in the 3rd place. This was concerning all neuroscience research since the 20 last year. I don't know if maybe you just focus on English papers or maybe research in general.
Thank you very much. I focused on research in general, but like I said earlier, the research was limited to articles deposited in Google Scholar in the last 365 days, which is just 1 year. So there was a limitation in that research, but it is important to expand it and look at publications in other databases, as well as other researches that analyzed African research on epilepsy before, like the one you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. But as you mentioned, I think there is a lot of efforts to be done. And also, we found it in the presentation of Dr. Gams before. The conferences and also the papers are really very scarce, and very few papers are published. And I think when you discuss with colleagues in Europe, in North America, in Asia, so the first thing to do is the search on PubMed. So when they search by names or by country, they find very, very few publications, and they don't respect us as we need. And I think Africa is a huge continent with more than 1.2 billion inhabitants and around 53 countries, a lot of cultures, a lot of resources, a lot of course, very few physicians, researchers, but I think with collaboration with multicentric studies, I think we can do a lot of things. And my hope is to finish with one representative per country. And I think now we have also another French speaking, which is AfriStaff meeting. And I think we have many colleagues in both groups. So I think we could succeed in having contacts in every country and maybe share a lot of questionnaires, a lot of studies to be done. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any other questions. We will discuss about the plants research concerning some medical plants. I don't know what you can say, Dr. Jacob.
Please come again. What was the question, Professor Najib?
About plant research, the use of plants in neuroscience and epilepsy.
Oh, yes. My view is that more research is needed in that area. And there's also need to bring people together. Some of the plans might not be known to people, and it's hard to begin research if you don't know them. So it's important to involve community stakeholders in research of that nature. But I think there are opportunities there. We have seen that with marijuana. There are opportunities there, but only more research is required to ensure that people understand what are the benefits and the risks of using certain plants.
Yeah, I fully agree with you about marijuana because we did the research recently in Morocco. I don't know if you know that Morocco is the first producer in the world of marijuana with 23% of all the world production, followed by Afghanistan, then Turkey, Lebanon, and other countries. So I think we have a treasure, I can say, North Morocco. Now we heard a lot of publications about West syndrome, Ohtahara syndrome, and Dravet syndrome, responding very, very well to CBD, cannabidiol, which is a derivative from cannabis. And I think we should work on this product. I think we can also maybe, if Morocco could start producing some medications using cannabis, I think it could be very cheap for Africa to be exported from Morocco to Africans than to go to Europe, than to come back to Africa with a much higher price. So I don't know if there are any other questions. I will also check on YouTube because we are also live streaming on YouTube.
There was also a question that I asked. A question that I asked Professor Lisk about government involvement in epilepsy work in Sierra Leone.
Yes, Jacob, I actually responded that the government does not directly support epilepsy research at the present time. The university to some extent does, but the government, the Ministry of Health does not directly, unless maybe it's related to some of their public health plans and their public health organized activities that they are doing. So they do not fund research.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisk, for that response. And we've also seen the same in Zimbabwe. Government intervention is limited. The government has got a plan that is a mental health plan, and the expectation is that epilepsy is covered under the mental health plan, but epilepsy is still not covered under the mental health plan. So there's no funding or programs specific to epilepsy in Zimbabwe. Thanks for sharing the situation in Sierra Leone, Professor Lisk.
Yeah, and also I have one request for our colleagues in Africa. It's just to get some contacts for us from neighboring countries who are not part of the alliance. I don't know, we have colleagues from Madagascar, but for example, we don't have colleagues from Seychelles and also from Maldives, for instance. But also I think from Angola, I think we don't have any contact in Angola, in Namibia, we have in Uganda, we have in Kenya. I don't have in Somalia, Djibouti, and also in Ethiopia. So So I ask everyone, by example, to get contacts for us in order to cover all the countries, the continents. I don't know if you have any other questions. Maybe Adam Janet is connected from Gambia, from UK.
Hello. Hi. I have a question. I have a comment, please.
Yes.
This is Musimbi from Kenya. Just to thank the participants for the wonderful presentation, and just to highlight on what one of them mentioned about united efforts and making a task force for research in Africa. I would suggest to the Alliance to also consider task forces for other areas. If we could have a task force for research in Africa, a task force for epilepsy awareness and publicity, a task force for lobby, advocacy, and fundraising, then through those avenues, we could lobby for funds and we could do united activities as an alliance, other than specific countries doing their own things, doing their own research in their countries. We could come up with maybe one big research touching on all members of the alliance on research, an activity for publicity and awareness as Africa Alliance, and also something to do with the lobby and advocacy as an alliance. My commentary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Musimbi, from, I think it's very interesting suggestion. So that that's also from Kenya. So it was also my suggestion, I think, for the first webinar. I think maybe since this meeting, I can also be part of the subgroup of research in epilepsy. But I think we have also for fundraising, I can also help because we have many connections with Middle East. Do you know, for example, in Qatar, in Arab Emirates, we have a lot of contacts there. For example, the Qatari Fund. Last time I asked for the deadline. I think they have two deadlines, one in February and the other one is in October. So I think we already worked on a telemedicine project for Africa. For example, to equip many centers in rural areas in Africa with telemedicine equipment, staff and everything, cameras, computers, internet connection. And I think at that time we could easily connect all the groups, patients with physicians, not only from Africa, but also from Europe, from other countries, in order to make very good diagnosis and to do also some meetings for patients, some sensitization, education programs and everything. And as you said also, Ms. Musimbi, I think we will have a lot of power when we are publishing biography papers from different point of view. For example, I can give you the Moroccan point of view. You can give me the Kenya point of view, the Zimbabwe, Gambia, Cameroon, every part of Africa. I think also our papers at that time will be much stronger and could be easily be accepted by high impact factor journals.
Yes, I agree with you, Professor Najib. I was wondering if you could present the certificates while people are thinking of one or two more questions before we wrap up the webinar.
Yeah, thank you for preparing the certificates. So I think here are the certificates. I think Dr. John Jabang from the Gambia, this is his certificate for his presentation in the last webinar, United Against Seizures and Stigma. The webinar we had at the 10th of July 2020. So thank you to Dr. John Jabang. I think he's not with us. Maybe he has some other occupation now. And also we have the second certificate is for Dr. Musufa Watila from Nigeria. So also he presented during the last webinar on coronavirus and epilepsy, the 10th of July 2020. Thank you to Dr. Musa Watila, to Dr. Jabang for all their efforts. And also we ask you, I think you can introduce this project, Jacob. Everybody can join us on our websites, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a YouTube account, a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and also a WhatsApp group. Would want to encourage you and to invite you to join us so that we chat, we share resources about epilepsy in Africa, as well as sharing ideas. We also do have a regular e-newsletter. If we get your email account, if you are not already on the list, we could add you so that you get regular updates from us. Thank you, Professor Najib.
What is the WhatsApp number?
Yeah, I think we have some questions.
Do you have the WhatsApp number, Professor Najib, or do you want me to share the?
Yes.
I've got the details in one of my slides.
Yes, you can share from your screen.
So that people can copy the details. Okay, I hope you are able to see them. There you'll be able to see, unfortunately, the WhatsApp number is not there. I'm going to read it to you. Sorry about that. I thought it was part of this list. That's +250 784 115 806. I'll put it here too. That's +250. That's our Secretary Chandel's number, 784 115 806. There it is in the chat space. There's the WhatsApp number. Thank you.
So, Jacob, meanwhile you are giving the WhatsApp number. So there is one question from Dr. Gams Daniel. He's saying that we have very few research on anti-epileptic drugs and reproductive health in Africa. So I think we can also focus on that topic. I think we'll mention this maybe. And I think we already started one study that I submitted to you, if you remember, about anti-epileptic medications in Africa. I think we can also add maybe in the same questionnaire all the aspects about reproductive health and maybe sort out one very interesting paper about this topic. I think, for example, the methodology of such paper could be, for example, during 1 month, we can see all epilepsy cases in women with epilepsy, and we can just collect all the data and make very nice paper. We have also another suggestion from Chantal. I think she is connected, but we cannot hear her or see her on the video. So she is our General Secretary of the Alliance. So she's talking about her experience as a social worker. She said that we need professional lawyers to seek human rights for patients. Example, in making up, apply the UNCPRD law, advocacy. So what do you, from Siri Lori, answer?
Thank you. Let's hear what others think, but I think reproductive issues are very important, and I want to suggest that if there are people who want to present on that topic, that could be a good starting point, presenting in the next webinar or the one after next month.
Okay. And also we have Adam Janesh talking about more holistic approach to epilepsy. I think we can also study this. We have also traditional practices in Africa. I think it's a very interesting topic. And I think last time also we discussed about terminology, and Dr. Musa Watila from Nigeria, who is a very active member, is already working on the topic. And I think he could collect all the names of epilepsy and also their meanings. And we asked in the WhatsApp group just to give us the meaning of each name in each dialect or each language in the different countries.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we can take two more questions or two more contributions or comments or reflections.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon, Michael. Good to see you.
Thanks. It's Mike from South Africa. In terms of collaboration, can we initiate the framework? I'll suggest initiate the framework, distribute it to all of us to our emails, and then we will then start to build on it, especially towards raising funds for epilepsy. Number two, okay, let me say, I'm very passionate about, I'm not working with epilepsy yet, I'm working with adulterated drugs. But at the moment, I think it will be much more valuable to look at the issues of adulterated drugs, illicit drugs, heroin, yaop, and everything in relation to epilepsy, because I think also epileptic people also are exposed to this type of a drug. And maybe in due course, because I'm actually in the very first step of compiling a literature review. Maybe over a period of time, I'll communicate with Jacob to maybe prepare a presentation to see the relationship between administration of illicit drugs, adulterated drugs, and how does it affect epileptic people in due course. I will communicate that with George in over a period of time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Very important suggestions. There are also some discussions in the chat forum. Professor Najib, did you see those?
Yes, I think we have Adam Jane. She is also saying that technology is a big one of important topics, and at the moment in Gambia, it's very difficult to do any outreach program. Technology is the key of the fight of patients with epilepsy due to COVID-19. I think, of course, COVID-19 is a very huge issue now, and I think it's emerging in many countries. I think we have to be very aware. And I think we did the first webinar about COVID-19. I think it was a very successful webinar. And also, I think Adam Janet, as I mentioned, she suggested the idea of a task force on more holistic approach to all aspects concerning patients with epilepsy. And also Musimbi during the AGM consider adding some of the new members to the various task force for inclusivity from all parts. I think maybe for the new members, just they can get in touch with me or with especially with Chantal or Jacob to be included in the WhatsApp group. And as I can say, my dream is to get one representative in each country in order to be the strongest component to start and to follow research in Africa, not only in social aspects, but also in research aspects, in scientific aspects.
Thank you very much, Professor Najib. Michael, I just wanted to check if you are receiving the newsletter.
Thanks. I do receive the WhatsApp, not the newsletter.
Not the newsletter.
No, only the WhatsApp I do.
Thank you. When you send me an email, remind me as well so that I add you into our mailing list.
Okay. And guys, I'm also trying to get Epilepsy South Africa to be on board. I'll do my best, and I'll actually communicate that with Jacob to get at least one of the neurologists or anybody else who works with epilepsy in South Africa to be on board. Then maybe that will add value towards the proposal that has been proposed by Prof. Nasib in order to get funding from international countries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for that. I think in the chat forum, there is one or two more people from Epilepsy South Africa. I don't know if they're representing themselves or they are representing the association, but they are there. Professor Najib, it looks like it's okay to close the meeting.
Yes, so before closing the meeting, I ask everybody to switch on his camera just to take a final picture. So please just close your camera. And before closing the session, so I want to thank our society here in Marrakesh, Youssef Ben Tashfin Society, which is offering us the Zoom meeting at any time we want for free. I think that's a very good opportunity. As it offered the website, I think now it's offering the Zoom link. And so I ask everyone to switch on the camera just to take the final picture. And I think the fourth webinar will be in 1 month. And I think we will continue communicating via WhatsApp and email just to get some other point of views, to start some research collaborations. And as I suggested, maybe if we can work hard this summer, we can sort out the first paper in epilepsy behavior, which is Stigma and Epilepsy in Africa. And of course, I thank Jacob for sorting out the second paper in AMIJ, African Middle East Epilepsy Journal, which has been published in second issue, which is for March and April 2020. I think that was a very good achievement. So I think we can just take some pictures. I'm taking some capture screen. And I asked maybe Professor Durdami-Lisk if you have any words, and also Laurie Harrell, if we didn't hear you, Laurie Harrell, if you can just say a few words before closing, and also Esther Wombi or maybe Adam Janet also.
All I have to say was thanks to Jacob and also to Professor Najib for arranging these webinars. They're very useful, and I think it's a start. We need to build on this and also to expand epilepsy research and knowledge in Africa. I thank you very much for your effort, and I hope that we're able to keep this going. Thank you very much, Professor Najib, also for your efforts.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'll just say thank you as well to everyone. Sorry I couldn't be here for the whole duration of the webinar. It's Eid here today, and you know, I'm in the kitchen cooking and everything. But I thought I'll just quickly join in. I just saw the last part of the presentation, but surely I'll be watching it later. Very, very interesting topics that are being raised there. I like the idea of having task force for every issue that affects people with epilepsy. And because if we do that involving every single country, I think that will go a very long way, and we will all be speaking from the same page, which I think is really important. And thank you, Jacob and Professor Najim, for always ready and being here.
Thank you very much.
You guys, yeah, thank you.
Laurie Harrell.
Yes, thank you so much for including me in this presentation today. I'm just here to listen and to learn. It's good to see some familiar faces, Dr. Lisk and Dr. Kazadi. I represent the Roe Foundation, which is a U.S. private foundation with a focus on helping people with epilepsy in under-resourced areas of the world. So we do have a good foothold in Africa, projects involving training for healthcare professionals, also diagnosis and treatment. And so I've worked with some of you on programs, and I hope to get to know many more of you. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And Epilepsy, hi.
Thank you, and bye everybody. See you in the fourth.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Have Jacob, did you guys have the meeting before, or did you manage to do it?
No, we didn't. There were connection issues to be fixed.
All right, okay.
Well, after 10 minutes past, so we couldn't do it.
All right, okay, all right. Hopefully another day then.
Yeah. We do have to rearrange the meeting and see when we can.
All right, and obviously I will be able to attend to that one. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Kembo. Good to see you.
Oh, Dr. Jacob, it's very good to be here.
Good.
And I'm learning a lot from the group. Unfortunately, in Mozambique, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a really challenge. I am not a physician. I'm a simple teacher. And I'm representing a map, and I'm worried about research in Mozambique.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's very serious. It's a big problem, stigma, and so forth. Hey.
Yeah, we need to keep.
One day I will contact you.
Going. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. I'll always try to be here whenever I'm free.
Thank you very much. We'll keep the discussion going.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.